already arrived, and I'll give 2-3 minutes for the people who are enjoying the refreshments so that they'll join, they don't miss the intro. I thought I'll take this opportunity to really brief you what's happening in MMA next, at least 1 month, in the month of January. The month of December, we had number of programs, closed the year with very high number of programs and high profile programs. But luckily, we are also starting the January 2023 with again high profile programs and really some outstanding speakers. Yesterday, you were missed listening to Ashwin Mahalingam talking about entrepreneurial ecosystem and what's the methodology you must follow. I think everybody must watch, because entrepreneur, he really put it in such a beautiful, simple ways, how the ecosystem can be implemented, and I'm quite sure large number of educational institutions would have benefited. Tomorrow, on the 19th of January, we have an event, Read and Grow, and the discussion this time is Infinite Game by Simon Snake, and this is a program which we do it more for management students, because we strongly believe to be a great leader, you have to be a great reader. And again, we have got an outstanding panelists, Mr. Vijayalakshmi, Hari Krishnan and Babu Krishnamurthy will be there discussing on the book and how important and key takeaways from the book. On 20th of January, not to be missed event, I really urge upon you. It's happening on 20th of January at 6 o'clock at MMA Auditorium in person. So you'll have the benefit of interacting with Manish. Do come and interact. Otherwise, as usual, watch it online. Then on Tuesday 24th, again, an outstanding speaker. And the topic, what she's going to speak, is under Women Business Forum, Well Left. And what I asked her, what do you mean by well left? Actually, well left means, she says, when India-Pakistan final match, cricket match, Ashwin was there, and one ball he left it, and he got one extra ball. As well as next ball he could run over, and next he could hit a sixer, and ultimately India went on to become winning the match. So Bharati Bhaskar, she is all, she's a very good, she's a motivational speaker, writer, diversity champion. She's going to be talking on this subject. She is again a very interesting speaker on a Women Business Forum. Come and listen to her. What is she going to share? And you all know, must be reading her article in Times of India every Saturday. She writes about Tirukkural and the learnings. And MMA also not left behind. We also going to discuss quite a bit about Tirukkural. Every month we are going to have management techniques from Tirukkural. We have got some outstanding speakers to come and speak. The program in Tamil this program will be happening in Tamil, and that is also happening. I'll tell you the date, what's going to happen. Then again on 27th of June, again an interesting event, Over the Barrel, a perspective on oil industry, oil markets, and the geopolitical drivers. This again, oil is in fact, many a time we said oil is the new currency. Many people say, some people say sun is the new currency. So all this is gone, but oil is an important factor which is playing in the global field today. And Ilango is the managing director of Hindustan Oil Exploration Company, and Shankar is going to lead the conversation. This is again happening in person at MMA Management Center on 27th. And as I mentioned, Tirukkural is happening on the 30th, Management Techniques in Tirukkural. This program will be having it every month, and Professor Subramaniam is a Vice Chancellor of Tanjai Tamil University and Vice Chairperson of Central Institute of Classical Tamil will be talking, because we have a large number of members from our chapters located in different places. They love to listen Tamil, and Tirukkural is one we learned, studied, we really forget some of the important elements which can really impact us, and we go to some of the best international authors. You must listen to Tirukkural and listen to Professor Sundaramurthy. It will be a great learning value for you. Then we also have number of lectures already done in the month of February, also in the month of March, and I won't take your time. Now, I want to tell you only thing is, major MMA flagship event is happening on the 26th of February, our annual convention. It's happening on the theme India's Century, how to drive sustainable inclusive growth. McKinsey is a partner, and senior leaders from McKinsey will be a part of this convention, and also bringing in some outstanding speakers, national, international. Do register, and we are doing it at IIT Research Park. We kept the cost so low so that more number of people can attend the event. That's very affordable. That's why normally we do it in Torch Coromandel. We also thought sustainability, inclusive growth. We moved to IT Research Park Auditorium, where you can come and pay a nominal amount, attend a full one-day convention, and meet some outstanding speakers. So you go to my website, it's already the full details are there, so be not to miss. And coming to today's event, and Mr. Naveen Unni is a very, very close friend of MMA, close friend of us. And when he said he has written the book, he mentioned to me that I'm sending the copy of the book. I said, no, don't send the copy of the book, but you should be talking about this book in MMA platform. This happened about 2 months back, if you remember. Naveen, immediately we fixed the date, and getting a date from Naveen also a big challenge, actually, because he's so busy, he travels around so much. He heads Chennai operations of McKinsey now, and very, very busy person. And thanks to Naveen that we are able to present this event, Decarbonizing India, Charting a Pathway for Sustainable Growth. And we also got some outstanding panel here, and I am really delighted to have with me back, welcome back, our president, past president, Ravichandran Purushothaman, Danfoss, is again, who has been a great source of inspiration and support MMA. And we also have with us Arunkumar Sampath, he's again from Tata Consultancy Services, Mr. Kanakasabapathy Subramaniam from Ashok, Leyland. He's coming, he's on the way because he got stuck in the traffic. He'll be here any moment. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hand together to welcome our distinguished speaker and panelists for this evening, Naveen, Ravi, and Mr. Arunkumar Sampath. Kanaka will be joining later. May could you please take your place on the dais, sir. Whatever you want to speak on this. So I'll introduce all the speakers on the road. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to introduce you the distinguished panelists because the subject which they are going to discuss, very dear to so many of them, not many really understand the subject, but today if you don't understand this subject, you are going to be perished, especially young people and especially the old people. You must leave the world which is good, better, as much as you enjoy it for the young people. Plus, you have to be in business, you have to be in operations. I don't want to tell you in detail, every day you read a newspaper, you'll talk about this subject, pathway for sustainable growth and inclusive growth, and also decarbonizing India, many things. But today we have an expert who's author of the McKinsey report, which is one of the finest report in circulation today on this subject. Let me have the privilege of introducing Naveen. Naveen is passionate about transforming organization sustainability and building new digital analytics capabilities. Naveen is a managing partner of McKinsey Chennai office and returned after 9 years in Australia, where he set up and ran the Perth office, and he has an extensive experience in large organization transformation, having helped at least a dozen cities clients to transform over the 18 to 36 months. Naveen has worked with McKinsey over 19-20 years and with experience in Australia, South Asia examples, and recent client project, which includes very important, there are a number of them. I'll mention only one or two of them. His detailed profile has already been shared with you. Led the comprehensive business transformation of $6B from Australian Agri Cooperative. They created analytical capability for a large Australian retail conglomerate, built a 10-member analytics team, deployed multiple analytics views, and within the short period of 12 months, Naveen has also co-authored several articles, publications, and regular speaker in public forums. He is an MBA from IIM Ahmedabad and a BTech from Civil Engineering from Indian Institute of Technology. And Naveen has been great to support MMA. We know him for the last couple of years. They are the knowledge partner for MMA, major events, and a lot of initiative what we do. We really consult him. Naveen, it's a pleasure to have you with us. It's always great to listen to you. Let me have the privilege of introducing my past president and the president of Danfoss Industries Limited, Ravi, popularly known as the president of Danfoss Industries, 100% subsidiary of leading family-owned Danish MNC, Danfoss, headquartered in Denmark since 2013. Danfoss is the world leader in mobile hydraulic electrification, cooling and refrigeration. Prior to this role, Ravi was heading Danfoss motion control business, Asia Pacific. He has been with the Danfoss since the year 2002, and prior to that, he was with Siemens India in Germany, and various roles ranging from sales, marketing, strategy, and much more. Ravi is also a member of the global management team and the board of member and the global mentor for 2013. He's an active member of industry bodies like Chairman CIA Chennai 2014-15, Chairman of CIA Tamil Nadu from 17-18, and many of the CIA initiatives on food, agriculture, excellent. Ravi was the past president of Madras Management Association for the year 2021, and during this period, we really transformed in terms of digital and multiple roles, and Ravi has been a great source of inspiration and supporters. Very warm welcome to Ravi. Welcome back home. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. Let me have the privilege of introducing another distinguished speaker for this evening in the panel is Dr. Arunkumar Sampath. Dr. Arunkumar Sampath, the principal consultant of Tata Consultancy Services. Arun Sampath has over 26 years of experience in all gamut of automotive, aerospace, defense fields, including sustainable mobility, 5G network, AI, edge computing, and much more. And air taxi autonomous and also connected to technologies, automotive electronics, and he is also a cyber security expert. He is an MBA holder from Lawrence Technology University in USA, a PhD from Maryland, USA, and MS from Villanova University in USA, BTech from IIT Madras. Anybody doing so well in Delhi has to be BTech from IIT Madras. This is what I keep seeing in many of our speakers and senior corporate leaders in Chennai. So we should be proud of IIT Madras. He is currently the employee in Tata Consultancy Services in Chennai and the principal consultant of industry advisor RIG at CTU office team. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Arun, and really looking forward to listen to you. In absentia, he'll be coming and joining us any moment. Let me have the privilege of introducing in his absence Dr. Kanakasabapathy Subramaniam. He is a Senior Vice President Product Development of Ashok Leyland Limited. He has obtained his PhD from Cornell University in Electrical Engineering with specialization in Microelectronic Mechanical System for MEMS, and he is currently the Senior Vice President of Ashok Leyland, as I mentioned to you earlier. He was also CEO of the Executive Director of R&D in Power Gear Limited, NEPS Chennai, and he also worked in GE Global Research in New York. Subramaniam has filled more than 50 patents applications in the field, and he managed a large program on MEMS and at GE, and received 2 prestigious awards for his research work. One of them is the Hull Award. It's presented to early career research at GE Global Research. And GE is a firm where you worked, you should be really proud of. One of the finest organizations in the world is GE. The other award of Whitney Technical Achievement Award is for a project that is viewed as a potential market game changer. And Subramaniam also a Six Sigma black belt holder. And some of the youngsters over here, MMA does regular course on Six Sigma green belt as well as black belt. So come and attend. It's not that karate black belt. You come, listen, you'll become a very, very wise leader. He has made significant contribution to multiple unique projects and has authored numerous publications and technical reports. Gentlemen, why I read the profile so detailed? Because you must understand you are listening to some of the finest brain in the world today on talking on this subject actually. Because this is a subject which is dear to our heart, dear to Mr. Ravi, and dear to so many of our committee. Our entire convention is based on this, something similar to this. In addition to that, very warm welcome to all the viewers watching this program online, live from our own MMA channel, and YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and also MMA Radio. As usual, if you have any questions, please share your question to the number which is flashed on the screen. We'll be delighted to pick up your question, place it before the distinguished panelists this evening. To respond to all your questions, please restrict your question relevant to the theme what we are going to be discussed. In addition to that, I also welcome a lot of people who have come here from different organizations. At the end of the session, we'll open it for the questions here. If you have any questions, keep it ready so that you can ask as many questions as possible, which the panelists will be delighted to take. The format of the program, I'll request Naveen, who is the author of the report. He'll make a short presentation for 15-20 minutes, followed by Naveen will have a conversation. It could be on a fireside chat mode with each of the speakers who are here panelists, and each of the speakers will also be requested to share their thoughts for about 4-5 minutes. Then the conversation, Naveen will lead it. Over to you, Naveen, and looking forward to a great evening today.
Good evening. Can you hear me at the back? Excellent. We'll just wait for this to come. Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Good evening. So I'm here. I'll do this very, very quickly. I've done a 1.5 hour version of this. I've done a 45-minute version of this. This is the Pressy 15-minute version. You'll realize why it's hard to do a 15-minute version, because it's a 244-page report. In fact, when I told my wife the size of the report, she said you should have just published a book. I said that is what potentially this would have become, but we did the report. This was a year plus about 18 months of work that we did to put this report together. And the difference between this report and most of the reports in this space is we took a lot of very deep sector views into this, right? So most reports look at sustainability and decarbonization as a standalone topic and look at that. What we did was we brought people who are power experts or auto experts, steel and cement experts and use their insights to drive a lot of what would happen. So we didn't ask the question, what will EVs look like of sustainability experts. We asked what will EVs look like from our deepest auto partners and the practice. So the difference between this report and many others, therefore, is the depth at which we go, which is why it's 244 pages. I would encourage you to at least read the exec summary, which is about 30 to 40 pages. Obviously, you've come here, so you don't even need to do that because I'll give you the highlights of the report. There are 5 core messages that we give as part of this. The first one is a massive message of optimism. And this, I think, is something that we all have to remember. India is in quite a unique position. Almost no other major geography or economy has the advantage that India has. And why do I say that? Because 3/4 of India is yet to be built. You take a GDP growth rate anywhere between 4 to 5% over the next 20 to 30 years. It looks very small, but over a 30-year period, 5% year-on-year growth is actually quite phenomenal, right? Compounding works. And essentially what you'll end up with is an economy that is 3 to 4 times as large as now by 2050 and almost 7 times as large if you go further into 2070. Many of you here will know that India has a net zero target by 2070. It's part of our obligation, what we have committed to. But the reality is that 2070 may be too late. Therefore, we did in our analysis, we looked at both what would it take to do it by 2070, but also what would it take to do it sooner than 2070, right? Decarbonization or net zero by 2050 instead of 2070. In both of those, the big insight that 3/4 of India are yet to be built, which means that we have so much more to do. The implication of that was, if we build it right now, as in we build more green economy now, or green power, renewable energy, or if we build more electric vehicles, we actually have the benefit of not having to retire assets. What do I mean by that? Most developed countries, demand has flattened, which means that if I have to switch from coal-based power to renewable energy, I have to retire my coal-based power plant, right? And therefore, it actually has an economic impact on the country. In India, I don't need to do that. Even though we have a lot of very young plants, our coal fleet is about 12 to 15 years on average. The life of a coal plant is about 40 years, 30 to 40 years. So you can imagine if the age is only 15 years, there's another 25 years I have to keep burning coal. The advantage that India has is because there's 3x more growth, I can start building all the additional growth in green, which is an opportunity that pretty much no other country, including China, has currently. So that's the first message. The second is that there are a lot of tailwinds already. And what I mean by tailwinds are, there's a very favorable breeze blowing and there's a lot of momentum in some sectors, right? So mobility and power. So auto is one sector where there's a lot of momentum. Power is another sector where there's a lot of momentum. And the good news is power and mobility are the 2 largest sectors in terms of emissions, right? So if you take power and mobility as major sectors with emissions, the reality is that there is actually a lot of good news, and therefore the likelihood of getting to decarbonization in those sectors is quite large. But there are a few other areas where we need a big push. So green steel. So steel and cement are both going to grow. If India is going to grow 3x, 4x, steel and cement will grow that much because that much more construction will happen, that much more. And both steel and cement have a fundamental challenge that many of you may know, which is in the process of making steel and cement, carbon dioxide is released. And it's very hard to replace that. In steel, it's somewhat, there is at least a kind of a different technology I can use called DRI-H2 that uses green hydrogen instead of the classic blast furnace process. But in the case of cement, there isn't an alternate technology as such. So steel, cement, material circularity are all important dimensions which we need to continue to push, because the 50%, which is mobility and power, there's good momentum. But in the other sectors, we still need a big push to decarbonize. So that was the second. The third is the real challenges in decarbonizing in India are actually not the economics. The economics are favorable in many instances. The technology is also there, right? In many cases, 10 years ago, if you'd asked me renewable energy, will it grow at this pace? I would have said probably not. We have surprised ourselves. The challenges are actually very real world. So the challenges around how do I make sure that if I add renewable capacity into the grid, it can actually connect into the grid. So do we have sufficient transmission and distribution capacity. If I want to put up a renewable energy plant, do I have enough land? Becomes a real issue. Financing becomes a real issue. So the challenges are more social and real world around, do we have enough land, do we have enough capital? But the good news is the economics works and the technology exists. So the challenges are real. I'll come to that as I go through the presentation. Having said that, we did look at what are the benefits versus the downsides. So it's great to say, okay, it should be green, but what are the economic benefits for us as a country? And the reality is, given that we are such a energy import dependent economy, it actually makes a lot of sense to go green. If you look at what has happened in the last year when crude prices went up to our foreign exchange reserves, that itself will give you a fairly big clue that there is a lot of energy security linked into this energy transition that we have an opportunity to take advantage of. Because of that, the benefits will exceed the downsides. This is, by the way, not even factoring in the fundamental challenge we have right now. So if you all remember in Chennai, how much rain has come in the last 5 years during our monsoon period, that is an indicator of the kind of changes that climate change will start seeing. India is particularly vulnerable, and not just in Chennai, but across the country, to very different types of climate issues. Whether it's extreme heat, whether it is floods, whether it is drought, we have all these challenges across the country. So I'm not even factoring in the benefits of if we can arrest climate change, we can potentially not pull back, but at least not further worsen climate conditions. And especially for the young folks here, this matters more probably to you than to us, right? I mean, I've got kids, so I care about that as well, but it matters more to you than to us. But the reality is the benefits of decarbonization, even not factoring in adaptation, is quite high. So we should be doing this, is the message 4. And the last message is really interesting because in one way you can say, look, over the next 30 years, things will happen. It's good. India is all good news. Why don't we do things in a certain way? And, why do we need to do things now? We'll do it from 2030 onwards. The fundamental challenge. So we already went through and are going through one basic transformation already, which is the digital transformation. The other big transformation now is sustainability. So let's look at these two in one fundamental aspect. The digital transformation is a services transformation. There is some infrastructure and capital required, but it's a very people intensive transformation. Sustainability, on the other hand, is a very capital intensive transformation. So the amount of capital you need, by our estimate, something between $7 and $10 trillion. 7 to 10 trillion, just to put it in context, is India's current GDP is about 3.1, 3.2 trillion, right? So this is 3x of current India's GDP has to be spent over the next 30 years to decarbonize. But if we don't invest that capital wisely now, you have problems later. Simple issue is, suppose I have to put a power plant now. That power plant has a life of 30 to 40 years. So every investment we make from here on, if we don't make it green, there is a cost to pay. So that's why we believe that you have to act now. Even though there's optimism and all that, if we don't act now and both face these challenges head on that I talked about on point 3 and invest and build the right type of infrastructure now, this generation will somehow survive, but the next generation will have all the challenges of getting to net zero. So these are the core messages. If I had to condense my entire chapter or report into this is 5 messages. I'll just touch upon a few points through charts and then we'll get to the discussion because I'm very excited by the panel we have put together. And welcome, Dr. Subramaniam. Thank you for coming. So we'll just get to a few of the key insights to these charts and then I'll get to the actual panel discussion. So the first point is that 5 industries in India contribute to 72% of our emissions currently. This number is potentially expected to go up further because power is going to grow. More and more things are going to get electrified. Industry is going to get electrified. Automobiles are going to get electrified. So power is actually going to grow. So if things were going as is, roughly 60 to 70% of our carbon emissions are going to come from 2 or 3 industries. 80% will come from these 5 industries. So we looked at these 5 industries and said, if we can arrest the 72%, then we have gone a long way in getting to decarbonization. So those were where we did the deep dives that I talked about. This is the point I made around demand growth, right? So you'll see on the left-hand side, this is the kind of demand growth that's expected in each of these sectors. On the right-hand side, what you see is if we did nothing right now, our current emissions of about 3 gigatons of carbon per year will grow to something like 11.8 gigatons per year by 2070. And this is a very theoretical scenario. We are doing things right now. We are building renewable plants. So this is a theoretical scenario saying current course and speed, if we did nothing more, we'd get to 12. The good news is we're doing a lot. And if we continued on this and made the right set of actions, what we call line of sight scenario, we won't get to net zero by 2070, we'll get to 1.9. So the good news is it's going down, but it's not going down enough. It is not getting to net zero at all. So then we estimated an accelerated scenario where we said we'll push even more, introduce new technologies, invest more capital, shift agriculture, which by the way is one of the 5 industries that I talked about. And then what would happen is we'd get to 0.4 gigatons here. Still don't get to net zero. This is all basis today's technology. In 20, 30 years, human innovation will hopefully get this to zero. But from where we sit right now, this is where we see it. So the good news, if I had to give this to you, is in an accelerated scenario, we can get very close to zero. And we can get very close to zero by 2050. It's not easy. Let me repeat that. It is not easy, but it is doable. We identified several decarbonization themes. I'll just call out a few here, which many of you will know, and a few that you may be surprised by. The ones that most people know is adoption of renewable energy, faster penetration of electric vehicles, green hydrogen. You've seen this week, the green hydrogen mission was launched. Some of you will know carbon capture, utilization and storage. Those are the well understood ones. But even we were surprised by a few. We were surprised by material circularity. This whole idea of waste to wealth is a massive lever for decarbonization. Because waste to wealth means that I don't need to produce that much. Plus, landfills generate a lot of methane. I don't know if you have seen pictures of Delhi or London this summer, or this summer meaning 2022 summer, where there were landfills that caught fire. That happens on an ongoing basis, by the way, because landfills compress, there's a lot of carbon there, generate methane. Methane is many times has a many times higher greenhouse gas warming effect than carbon dioxide. And those are the kinds of challenges that we can face if we do some of these. So material circularity, sustainable farming. Agriculture is one of the largest contributors of carbon dioxide in India, or broadly greenhouse gas warming, because it has both methane, CH4, cows, as well as rice paddy farming, and standing water had a lot of methane into the atmosphere. And sustainable agriculture is very, very important. The other dimension is a challenge, which is that to do a lot of this, you need so much land. You need an additional 15% of India's land mass, because land goes into renewable energy, so solar panels. Land goes into sustainable agriculture. Land is going into urbanization. In India, one of the biggest challenges forthcoming is land availability. It will become one of our big issues in decarbonizing. So these are some of the surprises that we had. When we looked at this, there were some levers that we didn't know how important it was. It's very, very important. Now, I'm not going to go into depth on this, but I'll just give you a few highlights from the sector. So auto, for example, there are a few ideas we think are worth putting on the table, right, for what we can do. So is there a subsidy potential for electric vehicles? Is there a localization that we can do, an indigenization of technology? There is an implicit carbon tax already. If you look at the amount of tax we pay per liter of fuel, it is already an implicit carbon tax. And that's why, for example, two-wheeler electric vehicles are already in the money. You need some subsidization of those electric vehicles. But the reason the electric vehicles make so much sense right now, two-wheelers, is because fuel costs so much. So there's already an implicit carbon tax, just to keep that in mind. The question then becomes, is there anything else we need to do to accelerate electric vehicles? Right? So that's a very, very important dimension. In power, the biggest issue is not the economics, which makes sense, but it's actually all the supply side stuff. So for example, we need more infrastructure. The biggest investment, single biggest investment that India has to make on decarbonization is actually strengthening our grids, both the distribution grid and transmission grid. You don't have wires to put power into the grid, which is the biggest issue we have. Also to accelerate the power market and DISCOM reforms, distribution company reforms. We need stronger distribution companies that can do the strengthening of the grids. So the first 2 points, very, very important around strengthening the network that can actually take in a lot of the renewable energy. Having said that, that alone won't be enough. So just to look at India's, what the Honorable Prime Minister in the previous COP had called Panchamrit, the number one was that renewable energy will go to 500 gigawatts by 2030. We have not done more than 10 gigawatts a year of renewable energy build. We now have to do 40 to 50 gigawatts for the next 8 years. So we need both capital and need to mobilize a lot of capital, but we also need to do the fourth one, which we don't have much localized manufacturing capability. Most of the photovoltaic cells we buy come from China, right? China has 80 to 90% of the global share. So unless we have indigenous capacity and capability to put up these plants ourselves, build and then put them up, we have a real challenge. So good news, but also some real challenges. On energy, the energy mix that you see on the left is something we had modeled going out. And what you'll notice is coal continues to be a big part of our energy mix for the foreseeable future, because we have so much growth that we can start backfilling a lot of our growth demand through renewable energy. But coal continues to be a big part of the mix. Even in our accelerated scenario, it continues to be a big part of the mix. But can we start shifting from other sources? For example, aviation is one of the biggest challenges in terms of, I mean, you can put a battery car, but a battery plane, the battery will be bigger than the plane, right? That's how it's a big challenge. So you need sustainable aviation fuel. And how do you incentivize people to invest in, innovate, and do research around sustainable aviation fuel? Also, there are other fuel sources, like for example, municipal solid waste. Can we convert it to fuel? How do you actually high grade it to sustainable aviation fuel, as an example? Many other ideas, at scale, green ammonia production. We need to do several things to accelerate this shift on energy. But the idea I'll leave you with is energy security that I talked about earlier. As a country that imports a large part of our energy mix right now, going green has a significant impact in terms of energy security. And therefore, it is important for us to do this from multiple angles, not just from a carbon angle. Steel similarly has a challenge, like I mentioned, blast furnace to DRI H2 technology. Our view is potentially a carbon price, a very small carbon price can incentivize companies to make the next kit, the next set of investments into green technology. The challenge though is it's very complicated, because the moment you do that, the cost of steel goes up, and therefore you'll need to find alternate mechanisms to manage price. So there's some real challenges around steel. I talked about some of these, so I'm not going to go into each. So land requirement I talked about, technology and indigenizing I talked about. Managing the next set of capacity addition is very important. We're continuing to grow, our demands are continuing to grow, our renewable energy capacity may not grow at the same pace. So how do we manage the next set of energy additions over the course of this decade is a fundamental challenge we have to solve. And then right targeting. For example, there's a lot of sugar distillation, so ethanol distillation for sugar plants. How do you actually, is ethanol the right fuel, or is it sustainable aviation fuel, which is actually a much harder problem to solve, is a real question. So how do you get to the right solution and set the right incentives to get to the right solution? And the last one I'll call out is we need a lot more new capacity in electrolyzers, in batteries, in electric vehicles, that we are starting to see, but we're nowhere near how much we need, right? So how do you actually get that capacity growth? The fourth point I talked about is benefits exceeding downsides and challenges. I talked about energy security and reduced energy imports. Industrial leadership in electrolyzers, solar panels, battery cells. We have an opportunity to leapfrog. So in some sectors, we have a natural endowment. The sun is a natural endowment. Can we do something on green hydrogen and be the green hydrogen leader, which is hopefully what the green hydrogen mission will start to catalyze. But there are some spaces where India has an advantage if we invest right and we invest now. Lower inflation if we do an orderly transition, and future-ready industrial capacities. One analysis we did, it was a fairly high-level analysis, but what we did was we looked at the average Indian household wallet and looked at different things that people spend on to understand if the prices would go up or down. So are we as a household going to spend more or less in the future in a decarbonized world? And what was surprising to us is housing costs go up because steel and cement costs a little bit more, but fuel costs go down, mobility costs go down, energy costs go down. So on the whole, you're about the same. So from a household spend standpoint, going green in India is actually not a bad thing to do. It's not going to cost us much more, unlike in the West, right? So it's very important to keep that context in mind. The last point I want to leave you with is we have a 10-point agenda in our report, but I want to call out 5 things that for me are important, and I want to just leave them. The first is we don't have a national plan. We have a lot of rhetoric, but we don't have a plan. We don't have a roadmap even to give us the markers, like how much should green hydrogen be? Where should steel be going? How do we do alternates for cement? And we need that. And I think we need that at a macro level, we need it at a sectoral level. And there's some actions that are being initiated around this, but the need for a national plan has never been as urgent as now. The second is there are several market mechanisms and technologies that need to be accelerated. Compliance carbon markets is one. And compliance carbon markets, particularly for natural climate solutions. India is the largest issuer of carbon credits globally, but we think we've only scratched the surface. There's a lot more that we can do in this space. But also, we need compliance carbon markets for industries that are hard to abate, cement, aviation, and steel. So how do we drive that? The third, because of the capital requirement that we have, can we create a green bank? And a few countries around the world are kind of experimenting with this, and even some have created a green bank and a transition bank, which is really built for green financing and transition financing. So there is an opportunity around that. The fourth is to create certain policies or missions that are very much driven around the challenges. So land use policy. Like I mentioned, if you are short 45 million hectares, India's total land mass is about 315 million hectares. 45 million hectares. We have to find ways of incentivizing people to do the right thing with land. Because all of the things we want to do with our land are important. We need to plant crops for feeding people. We need renewable energy. We need to house people. Everything is important, right? How do you make those choices? The circularity mission is another one that we are very passionate about. We saw the hydrogen mission, but also a carbon capture utilization storage mission. These two technologies having a very focused effort. In our report, you'll see we've identified 5 potential CCUS hubs, industrial hubs where you can actually have carbon capture utilization storage, potentially economic. So kind of having that sort of central mission around that would be helpful. And the last one is the accelerate renewables and an enhanced hydrogen mission, some of which we are seeing, have seen this week. So let me end there. I think overall our report is a very optimistic one, and not optimism for the sake of it. We didn't go in with an answer. The numbers were what they were. The optimism comes from the kind of demographic dividend and the growth opportunity that this country has. Now, it is ours to use or ours to lose. And whether we like it or not, this next decade and how we use it, we'll see how much of this we can actually get, right? How much we can decarbonize. And so in many ways, it's in all our hands. I think it's not in industries or in government or in the public. It's all of us. We have to do something about this. Now, I do want to get to our panel and have a really great discussion. I am going to move and we're going to start a bit of a discussion there. But as Vijay said, if you have any questions, please send them online or have them ready, and then we'll get to the group as well. Thank you. This is my... Check. Check. Yeah. So I'm going to get a drink of water quickly. So I have to give something for the panel to do while I get that. If it's all right, I might ask each of you gentlemen to just give us your perspective, right, about decarbonization. All 3 of you, very different perspectives and very deep perspectives in this space. So I might invite you, Ravi, and then we'll go.
Thank you, Naveen, and Happy New Year to everybody. I guess we are starting this year with a very important topic, which is decarbonizing India. So I'm very glad to be part of this panel, and thank you for inviting me. I think there are a few things which I would like to bring to the table when it comes to decarbonizing. As Naveen, you mentioned that 2/3 of India is yet to be built. But one of the things we need to think about it is how do we make the 1/3 of India first energy efficient? So one of the key pillars to decarbonization is energy efficiency. While a lot has been talked about in the report, which is on the supply side, I think on the demand side, there's been tremendous initiatives done by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. One of the biggest examples right in front of us is the LED bulbs. How it has really cut down the energy footprint in the cities and in the houses. And so I think energy efficiency today is less understood and needs to be fully harvested. Today, India has got 500 gigawatts of connected load. And my belief is that 30% of this energy still is sitting there for us to harvest. And we already have technologies for that. So this is one important part is missing in your report. Not to pick holes, but just to highlight the importance of energy efficiency actually. The second important thing for me in decarbonizing is, we need a leadership direction, not just at a national level, but it needs to be at a state level. I mean, when you look at very great economies of the world, I pick Denmark as an example. I think when Denmark had the oil crisis in the 1970s, they actually decoupled GDP growth and energy intensity. That's how wind energy was born, And I think what India needs to do is to really proliferate every state government to think about a carbon neutral journey plan actually. A state like Tamil Nadu today actually has 40% renewable in the mix. Why can't Tamil Nadu lead the way to become the first state of carbon neutral? So we need visionary leadership at the grassroots level for fully harnessing the decarbonization opportunity that it has. I think the third important thing for me is after leadership comes building the ecosystem, right? I think decarbonizing has to be taken into as part of a social transformation, and it has to start with the entire population of India. I'll give you a small example of water. I mean, you've touched water as an important aspect. I think India needs quite a lot of water if it aspirationally wants to be in a semiconductor business, if it aspirationally wants to be in a data center business, if it is aspirationally wanting to be in the battery business actually. So today we are starved of water. We don't have clean water across India actually. So we really need to look at how do we first disrupt water in every urban cities of India. And water and energy has a very close nexus. If you want to pump water, you need electricity, and you still can't pump because you're still on a coal, So this has to be, we need a very, very strong plan on water. It's a very important thing because water touches the entire 1.4 billion people. And I think in 2023, we will be overtaking China in the population as well. And water becomes a very important per capita consumption story actually. So water is very important, and connected to water, there is a huge nexus between food, water and energy. Now in agriculture, we need to mandate what to grow, how much to grow, where to grow. I mean, almost the biggest disease in India is diabetic, and we still grow a lot of sugar. And sugar consumes a lot of fresh water. So we need a policy regulation on what to grow, how much to grow, when to grow, and what to grow across the states of India. So there has to be a lot of education in agriculture and a lot of directional shifts in agriculture. This is a very important piece that we need to look at actually. The decarbonization journey that India needs to take has been beautifully articulated by you. But I believe, I see this as a great opportunity for India to lead, in every crisis, it presents an opportunity. And why I believe India can lead this game, if you want to decarbonize a building, if you want to decarbonize anything, digital is the core of it. Because you need to know how much to measure, right? It's like you go to a doctor and he measures your different health parameters. So whether you have a factory as a cement plant or a steel plant or a mining factory, you need digital. Digital tells you what is your carbon consumption, what is your X and Y and Z actually. I think India has a very strong position in digital in the IT sector. Our IT sector should use decarbonization as an opportunity to pivot and lead the world in what I call as deep digital decarbonization. We can create digital twins of a building. We can create a digital twin of a factory. Using digital, you can actually go down to the smallest element in the factory where leakages are happening and fix them using technology. I know technology is the one important element for us to bring the change, but I think how India can lead is that we are already a very strong leader in digital. And I believe if we can get this act right together as an industry, as an ecosystem in India, we can actually create close to 3 to 5 million jobs only on decarbonization. Today, the biggest challenge for most economy is job creation. And here we have an opportunity where decarbonization can not only create an opportunity to disrupt India's footprint on the renewables and all of that stuff, but also lead India in skills and job creation actually. So I'll kind of stop here and then come in later maybe. But I think I'm kind of sitting here with a lot of optimism, because if energy efficiency can get us to 40% of decarbonization to 40-45%, I think we already have the technologies to fix some of the daily problems we have today. And why not? Why do we need to wait for green hydrogen to come, which is probably 10 years away? Act now.
That is necessary but not sufficient. So the very important question, right, and the very important methodological choice we took, which is energy efficiency is important, but given that 3/4 is yet to be built, the harder challenge, in a sense, was that. But I think I love all the ideas, and I do want to come back in a discussion on some of those, because I think you have not just taken the idea, but you have made it into something very tangible vision, very relevant for this group and for folks online, especially the deep digital decarbonization. So I'd love to kind of explore that further. But let me throw it to our colleague Arun.
Okay, thank you. I think I probably take credit for reading at least 150 pages of the 244 pages he has published. In fact, this afternoon, I was like staring at the laptop and making sure I understand the stats. So, and I was trying to remember them when I was driving here so that he doesn't surprise me with any quiz questions. But anyway, what I notice is, by the way, about 5-6 weeks ago, I happened to come across a few words called open data framework. Okay. I don't know if you are familiar with this. Whether it is oil and gas industry, or whether it is, let us say, energy intensive industries, for example, or even the climate change, for example, UNFCCC, correct? So I think I saw that referred in his report also. I stumbled upon these words a few weeks ago, about 4 or 5 weeks ago. Then I started digging more into it, and I happened to understand a little more about the climate change, and then I happened to get this report, etc. So everything kind of fell in place. So what I realized is today we, out of say 60 gigaton equivalent of CO2, we probably scratched the surface around say 2.7%. That means we are nowhere where we should have been by say 2020s. And by 2030, if we have taken specific targets in say COP 24, 25, etc., where we should have been, we are like nowhere close to it. And in fact, in COP 27 that happened in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt a couple of months ago, the biggest challenge was who will fund it? Where is the money going to come from? And in fact, they were still not able to, the 185 countries plus, they were still not able to come to a conclusion ki, what are the things that we should prioritize, and who's going to foot the bill, and who's going to commit what, and whatever commitments were given in say COP 24, 25, etc., or even in the Paris agreement, unfortunately, nobody has put the money on the table yet. So these are some of the challenges we have. However, if we have to meet, forget about 2050, even what Honorable Prime Minister Modi said about 1.5 years ago about 2070. If you have to meet that, every country has its own growth path. For example, it peaks differently. For example, China may be peaking differently, US may be peaking differently, India may be peaking differently, etc. So depending on the place where we peak and the industries that we have to go after, we have to take independent decisions and strategies. Means what works for US or Germany or Japan doesn't work for India. Because we have to look at things from our perspective. That's number one. Number two, in addition to the energy efficiency that Mr. Ravichandran talked about, for example, he said, forget about 2/3, 1/3. How do you improve the energy efficiency? If you look at any of the reports out there, more than the energy efficiency, okay? In fact, one of the graphs that he showed where the curve is actually going up, instead of curve going up, if the curve has to come down, the biggest impact, how the curve will come down is behavioral change. Nothing to do with technology. Human behavioral change. So I was very surprised when I read a few articles. In fact, I started digging more into it. Then I realized that the statistics show that energy efficiency will give you only so much. Carbon capture, etc. will give you only so much. But it's the behavioral change that will give you the biggest bang for the buck. And lots of times it is probably free. We have to just change our habits, change our behaviors. Then the next thing is, I don't know if you have read, just about a month ago, there was an announcement on the sidelines of COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. About 7 companies came together, GE, GM, Bechtel, I think a few other guys, they came together. And I was very surprised to read this news. And they said, look, it is not an innovation in one sector. For example, GE comes from, let's say, energy, power, etc. GM comes from automotive. Some other company comes from, say, different sector, etc. So what they are doing is they are doing cross-industry, cross-sector, collaboration, and open innovation. Okay? So what they are saying is, just because you did a fantastic engine or fantastic car, doesn't mean that you are going to do a fantastic job, because if your roads are like, what we have in India, where even though you may have built the best fuel efficiency car, you cannot drive more than 20-30 kilometers per hour, you cannot drive beyond a second gear or third gear, then what's the point? Okay? So I was reading through this and I felt that was very, very interesting. Then the next one is what is called the triangulation of 3 things. One is open innovation. Second is, as he touched upon, cement, power, steel, etc., which are what you call as energy intensive industries. Okay? The third one is, he also touched upon the carbon capture and storage, for example, utilization and storage. And if you look at that, what you realize is, if you have to draw a Venn diagram, 3 circles, for example, one is the energy intensive industries, second is the open innovation, means the collaboration, etc. The third one is the carbon capture. If you take the, the space in between, that is exactly where you will be operating. And if you are able to operate that, if you are able to do cross industry and cross sector collaboration and innovation, you will get the best bang for the buck. Okay. Next one is, when I was reading through the UNFCCC website, etc., the fundamental challenge that we have, forget about, Africa or, Asia or whatever, even within India, okay, sometimes they say the data that comes from Bihar or the data that comes from Tamil Nadu or Madhya Pradesh, it's not reliable. Whatever you publish on the national website, for example, somebody says, if Statistical Institute produces some data saying that India has grown at 3.7% or 6.8% or whatever, somebody says, no, West Bengal did much better than this, I think you are giving wrong information. All kinds of fights are there. So the fundamental thing that lots of articles on the net that talk about is, how reliable is your data? Number one. Number two, is your data auditable? Matlab, can somebody independently come and audit your data? Number 3, is there a fundamental format that every country can report the data? Because what Bihar does, Madhya Pradesh doesn't do, what India does, maybe China doesn't do. So even as basic as the data format that we have, unfortunately, there is no global standard. There is no global, template. So these are the basic things. The next one is taking the COVID example, where, India has taken the lead of not only producing the vaccine, but also giving the vaccine to over 150 countries, literally free of charge. Even though we had a challenge with respect to not getting a license or not getting any patent waiver or anything like that. Now, if, let's say, poor countries have to reach the emission standards, for example, let's say they cannot foot the bill or they want some licensing of technology or some help with respect to investment or whatever. I don't think there is still an agreement today, ki how do you go about doing that? Even for middle income countries or low income countries like say in India, that's a challenge. So forget about poor countries. That's a really big challenge. So these are some of the points that I thought I should probably touch upon above and beyond what was captured in the report. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you. And I also see some connections with what you said with what Ravi said, right? For example, the idea of data, idea of digital, what is the role that it has to play? India as a leader, not as a follower. I think there's some very interesting ideas. Thank you. Let me ask Dr. Subramaniam.
Can you hear me? Yeah, so thank you for inviting me to this event. And thank you all for coming on a Friday evening. Good way to spend your time on a Friday. I just wanted to start with a 10-second introduction. So I've done a lot of diverse things in my career. I was a scientist in nanotechnology in the US. I even worked for McKinsey for some time. Then I was the CEO of an energy company. Then I am now a senior vice president at Ashok, Leyland, which is an automotive company. So it's been a very, very diverse background. But then what I've kind of concluded at the end of all this is that any new idea has to be simple at heart, right? Because even simple ideas take a lot of effort to make it to product, to make it to markets. So if the idea is complex to start with, right, I think it's kind of doomed to start with. There may be exceptions, but it's a very simple conclusion I came to. So whatever I'm trying to do in the future, I'm trying to keep the core concept very simple, because I can explain it to people easily. I can form a team and get their buy-in easily. I can get the funding. I can get the mechanisms in place that much easily. So in that spirit, I just wanted to share two thoughts, opening thoughts. One is the problem of decarbonization looks very complex, right? And there are so many options, right? And every option has its own pluses, minuses. You heard all that, right? So there's very good points that came out. So I don't want to repeat any of it. I just wanted to put a different spin on it. So, and if there is something, there are so many options, there's so much complexity, then sometimes you look back and you look to nature and you kind of see how nature solves something like this, right? And if you look at the human body, for instance, we eat food, which is a hydrocarbon, which contains hydrogen, which contains carbon, right? And those are the two primary ingredients which provide energy to the body. And there's a lot of other vitamins, minerals, etc., which facilitate the functioning of the body, but let's keep that aside. Let's keep it simple. And the body is an engine that burns the carbon, burns the hydrogen. When you burn carbon, you get carbon dioxide. When you burn hydrogen, you get water. That's why when you exhale carbon dioxide, water. Right? And you inhale, you take in oxygen. Right? That's exactly what an engine does. Right? And I'm kind of spinning this because I'm from the automotive industry and we make engines. So to me, the body takes in hydrocarbon fuel, it takes in oxygen, it exhales carbon dioxide, water, which is exactly what an internal combustion engine does today, right? And which kind of tells me that there is probably nothing wrong with a carbon-based fuel fundamentally, right? For some reason, fossil fuels, carbon-based fuels, seem to be a bad word, right? So to me, it sounds like if nature has honed in on carbon-based fuels for all life forms, it's telling us something, that converting carbon to carbon dioxide is maybe not such a bad thing as it is made out to be. Maybe it is the most efficient way to take a fuel and convert it to energy. And we already know that. Right? I mean, there's nothing comparable to petrol or diesel even today. Take hydrogen and take batteries in terms of how much energy you can store in a given amount of space, right? There's nothing even that comes close. So what nature does is it reverses that carbon dioxide back to carbon outside, right? We can call it carbon capture, we can call it sequestration. There's so many names which define that. So To burn carbon, you get energy. That's in scientific terms called an exothermic reaction, which means the energy of the end product is lower than the energy of the starting product. And you get energy out of that reaction, which is what powers the body and powers an engine in an automobile. So to reverse that, you have to give energy, right? That's just a basic law of physics. So to convert carbon dioxide back into carbon and oxygen, you have to give exactly the same amount of energy that you got when you burnt it in the first place. And how does nature do it? It uses solar energy. It's called a leaf. It's called photosynthesis. It takes in solar energy. It breaks down the carbon dioxide. A leaf inhales carbon dioxide, gives out oxygen, keeps the carbon to grow the plant, right? And that's what a plant is. So that kind of energy over millions of years is essentially solar energy, right? So to me, the answer lies in finding a way to extensively use solar energy to capture carbon, right? But to me, again, as I said, it's probably okay to have a carbon-based fuel because there are so many advantages to doing that. The biggest being the amount of energy density you can achieve, right? Which there is no other answer today. Okay, so that is one thought. The second thought is again in the concept of keeping things simple, again from the automotive sector, right? Automotive sector is one of the culprits for emissions, and within that, lorries, trucks are the bigger culprit, right? To a smaller extent, four-wheelers, two-wheelers and all that. So we have been asking ourselves, right, because there's so much transition in the automotive industry, this decade especially, we have been asking ourselves, are we doing a brute force solution by saying that petrol and diesel are the culprit and therefore you've got to go to a greener fuel? Maybe it's hydrogen, maybe it's batteries. And again, how green these things are is still questionable because the process of making hydrogen, again, green hydrogen is today expensive and there is other forms of hydrogen which you still make from fossil fuels. Battery vehicles also, right? I mean, all of you have read about the environmental cost of just mining lithium, making the batteries, what happens to the batteries at the end of life. But that aside, right, fundamental question, is it right to blame the fuel in the first place? We psychologically blame the fuel because that's what you see. You see the smoke coming out of the tailpipe on the road, right? And that's a direct experience and you think, okay, it's the fuel burning. That's what causes the smoke. That's what feels bad, right? That's what causes the pollution. There's a few other invisible things like nitrogen oxides, etc., etc. So we've been asking ourselves that question, right? And we kind of came to the conclusion that, and I'm going to be a little scandalous here, that an automobile doesn't need fuel to run. Okay? Which is, again, as I said, it's going to be scandalous. But I'll explain that, right? And it's a very, very simple conclusion, right? And before I get to that, the reason we came to that, or one of the reasons we started brainstorming this was we thought that we are going to market with a brute force solution, saying that, okay, diesel is causing so much pollution. Let's go with hydrogen. Let's go with CNG, which reduces pollution to some extent. Let's go with all battery electric vehicles, which at least doesn't pollute on the road, maybe polluting somewhere else, right? So why did we come to this conclusion? Because we just all went back to high school physics, right? We said sometimes you've got to keep things so simple that what you learned in 7th standard, 8th standard, 9th standard probably has to be revisited. Right? And the first thing you learned about any object that moves, namely an automobile, is Newton's law, right? You learned that force equals to mass times acceleration, right? So F equal to ma. And if you think about it, that equation only has two terms, mass and acceleration, right? And amount of energy you consume is force times distance. I'll come back to that, okay? Whether it's a diesel fuel or whether it's a petrol fuel or whether it's a battery, you consume energy, right? So let's say you're traveling from here, Chennai to Bangalore, 350 kilometers, give or take. What Newton's law tells you is that you consume energy only when you accelerate. F equal to ma. If acceleration is zero, there is no force. Force times distance is zero. There is no energy consumption. right? Before any of you raise your hand and you're a purist and I say, talk about friction, etc., please set that aside. I'm just trying to give you a simple argument, right? So the nature is telling you, you accelerate once in Chennai, 0 to 80 kilometers per hour. It takes about 30 seconds, 1 minute. For that, you will consume fuel. Rest of the drive, if your road is good, you don't have cows or people crossing your road, and you don't brake, which means you don't accelerate again. Every time you brake, you have to accelerate. If you don't brake, if you have a smooth ride, your entire ride should be free. There should be no fuel consumption. It's a very simple fundamental fact, right? And it may sound crazy, but maybe all of us, whatever you're doing, you may be doing technology, you may be doing finance, something else, you probably didn't escape this equation, right? Newton's law was probably still thrust upon you at some level in school. So you've got to just repeat this so that it sinks in, right? Force is mass times acceleration. There's only two things that are important for fuel consumption. How heavy mass is your vehicle? Secondly, how often you accelerate, right? So the problem of fuel consumption is a problem of traffic management. It's not changing the fuel, because you only need to consume fuel when you start. After that, you don't need to consume fuel at all. It is a free ride. Nature works like it. That is what science is telling. Right? And many of us have forgotten these simple facts. How many of us really thought through that Newton's law when we read that in a textbook, right? We probably solved a few problems in exams and got the marks also, right? But the true import of that is, if something moves at a constant speed, it does not consume energy. So question is, how do you make it move at a constant speed, right? Idea for a traffic management startup, right? Can you manage traffic so nicely that you optimize the flow, that you don't brake, right? And then you literally have a free ride without fuel consumption. So I think maybe this unit of kilometers per liter, put it into our brain, that for traveling a certain number of kilometers, you actually need a certain number of liters. Completely false, right? And if you have purist level science questions, I can answer it offline. But there are other things like friction, air resistance, etc., and there are answers to that also, right? All I'm trying to say is, the problem of decarbonization does not have to be tackled brute force, right? So when I say I'm going to go to electric, which is fine, I'm not against that. What I'm trying to say is, you drive whichever way you want. You give your pickup, you keep braking, you keep on giving pickup and braking. Let the road be as bad as it takes. Let all people and animals cross the road. And I'm going to only solve the problem by changing the fuel. To me, that's the wrong way to approach it. Correct way to approach it is to go back to the fundamentals, right? And see how we can get close to an ideal driving condition. And then automatically you won't consume fuel, you won't pollute, right? So I just wanted to lay these two simple thoughts, that a carbon fuel is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you find another way to get back the carbon, right? Not easy, but there are ways to do it, right? And nature itself used solar. It used photosynthesis to bring back the carbon, right? And we can either choose to go that route, or we can try and beat nature. Second point is going back to simple things like Newton's law and finding out what it tells us. And that can give you such major clues to decarbonization that you may be surprised, you may be shocked at the results, right? And it's all simple. I was able to explain it to you in 5 minutes. Right? Thank you.
Thank you. That was quite a different perspective. Thank you. I'll just ask one question of this group. I'm also keeping an eye on the clock, and I want to make sure that we hear from the audience. So I have one question for all three of you. You all talked about different aspects of India's potential leadership, and I'll even take what you said, Dr. Subramaniam, as a different way of thinking about it, which I love, right? So let me ask you this question. What does India's leadership in this space, what could it look like? What could it look like? And I'd almost ask the question from a sense of, what are the 2 or 3 big ideas? So you talked about digital, for example, deep digital decarbonization. What would that look like if we were to take the leadership in that? Or Dr. Subramaniam, as you said, if it's around kind of a better traffic management system, still using the laws of physics, what would that look like? So I'm curious about how do we take this to action, not action tomorrow, but action over a 10, 15, 20-year period?
I think, when we build a future, it has to be a full ecosystem approach. If you look back the last 4 or 5 decades, we have not tried to solve the problem at the full value chain level. We have tried to solve the problem intermediary, and we have never been able to fix the holistic approach to problem solving. So when I talk about full value chain, it also means we need to build India-centric solutions with deep value chain where we don't rely on imports. We build open source technologies which can be easily scaled, and the speed at which you can scale using digital platforms is more cost efficient. And also, I always draw upon this amazing example of Amul. There is a company today which is almost decarbonizing the dairy industry. And if you look back at the genesis of how Amul was built using a circularity model embedded in everything they did. And they have built probably today one of the finest organizations which is almost decarbonized. There's a lot for us to learn from what they have done. And Amul is an ecosystem play. Today Amul can actually measure the temperature of the cow online, digital, and the farmer gets money digital. The quality of milk measured is digital. And all the technologies that have been built by Amul is indigenous, or at least the solutions have been done indigenously. So the one big takeaway for me, if India wants to lead, is we need an ecosystem approach.
I think I will stick to a couple of things. One is technology can only take you so far. At the end of the day, the behavioral change will be very, very important, number one. Number two, with respect to technology also, as he touched upon, there has to be growth plus sustainability, means inclusive growth. So these two cannot be this or that, they have to be together. Because at the end of the day, as he touched upon, India is going to be the largest populated country in the world very soon. So you have to produce the jobs, you have to give people the livelihood. At the end of the day, as he talked about, in the ecosystem, the Amul was successful because it involved a community. If there was no buy-in from the community, it would not have succeeded. As simple as that. So if you want technology or any solutions to succeed, there must be a community buy-in. Because you cannot randomly go to Africa or somewhere and say, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to change your agricultural methods. They are going to throw you out, or they may even kill you. Because that's not going to work. So there has to be, number one, convincing people, community buy-in. Number two, behavioral change adapted by the technology. So I would say these would be the combination. And India today, in fact, Honorable Prime Minister Modi says, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, Sabka Prayas, everything is like, collaborative, inclusive. So I think that is a very good approach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Spent 15 years in the US. Only thing I learned in the US is confidence, right? You can learn technology on YouTube today, right? Confidence. And I wanted to bring that back to India, been back in India for 12 years now. I think we have the brains. All we need is to realize that if we have the confidence, we can do it. We just need to bring the people together, focus the brains with the right degree of confidence. And I think it's actually an easy problem to solve.
I love that answer. It's a terrific answer. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Is it better to go here or is it better to go online? I think that makes sense. People who have actually shown up to see us on a Friday evening, as someone said, I think it's always a good idea to hear. Any questions from the group? Yes, please. Maybe we get a mic to you. Okay, can use that mic. If it's okay, you can just tell us your name and the organization you're from.
Yeah.
It's great.
My name is M. Ganesh. I am just a freelance consultant, auditor and trainer in ISO management systems. So I also take care in EMS, OSHAs and DNMS, also a lead auditor. So I do go for audits for major industries. So, okay, some of the things where we do. It's a very nice way of interacting with a different perspective, as you said. Some of the things with Dr. Kanakasabapathy said that like you have a free ride. So that's fine. As far as you have a long drive going with the roads coming with Nitin Gadkari's dream, which is happening everywhere, right? But we have to look into the urban transportations where there are so many commercials are there, people are there. So we have to look into that, how we can bring those things into that here, correct? And also the fuel perspective like hydrogen car, Nitin Gadkari just showed recently. So how are these things, whatever it is as what you said, can have a impact in the future? That's what we have to see. Go into little different spaces and areas in which how your thoughts can be inbuilt. You can, your views please.
Maybe you want to take that. I think the question is also kind of in the urban context that we live in. It's probably not, I mean, you will have to break a lot, right? So how do you kind of make that work, I guess is the question.
Yeah. I was obviously oversimplifying, but then what I said actually applies to the urban context as well. It's called regenerative braking. So you can allow a lot of braking and you can actually recover a lot of energy. Today, best technology recovers 20% of the energy. But there's a lot of technology that's coming that can go up to 70-80%. So you feel free to drive badly, keep braking, keep accelerating, you will still recover all the energy. Very close to getting to a free ride, and I can promise you that. To give you details, it will take a little longer, it's a bigger discussion, right? Secondly, your point on hydrogen, right? And hydrogen is a very nebulous sort of thing. To me, hydrogen is not a fuel, okay? And another crazy thing to say, but hydrogen is not a fuel because a fuel has to have an energy content. It has to have an inherent energy content. It's called calorific value in scientific terms. Right? And in hydrogen, you have to put in the energy, split water. There are many ways to make hydrogen, but let's take splitting water. You put in the energy from somewhere, wherever that energy is coming from. If it's green, it is solar, but if it could come from any number of sources. You put in the energy, split water, store the energy as hydrogen. So to me, hydrogen is a storage medium. It's a battery. And it's actually better than a lithium battery, if you look at it as a storage medium, right? And if you start looking at hydrogen like that, it actually starts to make a little more sense. At least weight-wise, it's more efficient than a lithium battery. And all the excess energy that you can produce if you use that energy to convert water into hydrogen. It's a fantastic way of storing all this excess, right? And there's a lot of further steps. You can convert it to ammonia, etc., etc. But hydrogen itself is a fantastic storage medium. So think of hydrogen like that, right? Whatever excess solar, excess wind, excess power that is generated in even coal power plants, right? Convert water into hydrogen and store that energy for later use. That alone will create a revolution caused by hydrogen. But don't look at it as a fuel, look at it as a battery.
There's some very, very, very good ideas in there. I just add one to your point. You know, one of the comparable challenges that we have faced. I don't know if any of you remember, folks on the front of the audience will remember, folks at the back may not. There was a huge ozone hole issue. Remember, there was a massive thing. Oh, everybody said ozone, you know, the layer was thinning. I used to be in Australia, big concern. Right? That is where the big hole was, right over Australia. Australia is right under it. And basically it was CFCs, right? The chlorofluorocarbons. Basically they were free radicals reacting with ozone, breaking that down. But we got our act together. The Montreal Protocol, there were a bunch of things that happened. So it is possible that as a globe, but the way that it works is through innovation, right? So I love the examples that we heard on regenerative braking and other technologies. But I think human innovation with 1,000 flowers blooming, with multiple technologies in parallel, innovating, and that for me is how these things will get done. I don't think there is a definitive answer yet. I think people are trying a few different things, and there's money going into lots of things. Some of that money will be spent money. You won't get a return for it. But through that kind of hyper innovation, I do think that there will be some technologies that will win. Whether it is hydrogen, whether it is battery electric vehicles, I don't know. And that's the reality of it. And I think given the scale of the challenge, many of these technologies need to happen in parallel as well. I don't think there's one silver bullet either. So my sense is, let's watch and kind of see where this is going. The one thing I will say is you need the right economic incentives. If policy isn't supportive, none of this can actually take off. Because when you start something like this, there's no incentive. Why should somebody do it? And that creating those economic incentives is very important. Then the innovation can take off.
Yeah, we'll take one more question, then we'll move. Yes, please, go ahead.
I'm Vishwanathan, visiting faculty for B schools and corporate trainer. The question is to Ravichandran. You mentioned about energy efficiency and especially the LED revolution. The other similar thing, very similar to LED, we have lots of ceiling fans which are used by the common fan. Why is it that this energy revolution concept, especially energy efficient fans, has not caught up in a big way in India?
So actually, the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, when this was mandated as a focus, when the Energy Act was brought in during Mr. Vajpayee's time in 1999, the initiative that was started was on heavy industries, which was largely the ones that were guzzling up like steel, cement, mining, paper, and all of that stuff. And in phase one, they came up with a PAT scheme, perform, achieve, and trade actually, where carbon markets were kind of the thought process on which the PAT scheme was launched. So we've done very well on that. Today, some of you may not know that we have one of the world-class cement plants in India. The energy that we consume to produce a ton of cement, we are the world leaders, right? We have achieved that because we had this PAT scheme. So there was a motivation to go after something actually. Now, when it came to the apparatuses like, a bulb, a fan and all of that stuff, there was a thought process of using, EESL, another company which was part of BEE, who were kind of becoming energy solutions company for government. So there has been multiple products that has been looked at. I know that fans are part of it. I know mixies are part of it. Wet grinders are part of it. So there are a lot of things that are already on the horizon that is being implemented right now. The energy labeling program for fans, the energy labeling program for air conditioners is also part of that stuff actually. So there is already a very high focus on those products, and I guess that's going to only increase more. What was a 5-star in 2020 is probably a 4-star today. And what will be the 5-star in 2028 will be probably defined in 2025. So I think we are getting onto that envelope, and I think we will be bending that curve quite well in my view. There are great initiatives already in place in my view there. Yeah.
Great.
But again, we should not get too much on technologies. There are multiple things of solving the problems like you mentioned, right? So technology agnostic thought process must be there. And there are multiple ways of solving this. BLDC is one form actually, but there are other technologies as well that can be done differently. I think that's where this innovation culture needs to, proliferate much faster than what it is today, But again, we should be careful that we're only looking at solving one problem, and while we solve one problem, we should not create another problem actually. Lithium battery is one good example of that, right? You have a huge foreign exchange drain already on oil and you want to solve oil, but then you build another parallel pipeline of bringing in more things out of India. So we need to really be very smart in choosing the right path so that we become more resilient on a medium term and long term actually. And that's why I believe an ecosystem approach would be a better approach to look at some of these segments and sub-segments.
Thank you, sir. I think over 540 viewers are watching this program. We got quite a number of questions online. We got another 5 minutes. I'll try and squeeze in as many questions as possible. The first question from Mr. Tulsi from Chennai. He says, sir, coal is a major source of power in India and coal is available in abundance, and why should India avoid it? And what is the way forward to produce power using coal with less emissions and most economical way?
So two things. One, we still are going to burn a lot of coal. We need a lot of power. We don't have sufficient renewable energy. So it is going to be a coal-driven economy. Even in our accelerated scenario by 2040, quarter of our energy, 25% of our energy is still coming from coal. This is not to say that coal is bad or good. There's no judgment here, right? All we are saying is decarbonization good or bad? The answer is unequivocally yes. We have to decarbonize. To decarbonize, I have to burn less carbon. It's just fact of life. To do that, I have to start finding alternatives to coal, number one. And number two, just as much as we have abundant coal, that coal is not of the best quality, we know that. And we also have abundance of the sun. So yes, we have one endowment, we also have another endowment, right? Those endowments are not necessarily, it's not a competition between. We do have fairly good sunlight, we can use it. Now we have a different issue which is pollution and therefore efficiencies are lower. But the reality is we do have significant endowment like coal in other renewable forms. And the idea is now, can we change the mix? Can we get the mix to change so that we are more resilient going forward? So not at all making a judgment on whether coal is good or bad. Coal continues to be a part of the mix. But if we do not diversify some of these, the issue that will become is every plant that we put in now, every coal plant we put in now will have a 30-year life. So imagine in 2027, I put a plant. In 2057, I'm trying to shut it down, right? So then it becomes harder and harder going forward to reverse those decisions. So the idea, and even in our 5 points, you'll see one of the points is manage capacity. It's not saying shut plants. It's not saying don't open another plant. Manage it well so that you have options in the future. That I think is the important one. As a country, we should have options. We should diversify our mix. That is where we should be pushing.
Great. So just to add to this from my side, Mr. Ravi said the water is a major issue. India is, the major power is done from hydro in India along with coal. If that is the situation, you look at nuclear. I mean, nuclear power is again, it's become expensive and depend on thing, and safety is issue. Under this context, what's your advice for India and government to move forward? Whether we go to hydro, water is the issue, nuclear, depend on international restriction, coal. So what do we do under these circumstances?
See, this is like a crystal ball glazing at the moment, actually. I mean, there are so many different technologies that, the world can offer. I think nuclear is certainly not ruled out. If you can get the size of the nuclear plants smaller, let's assume hypothetically, if you have a small nuclear plant which gives you 15 kilowatt of energy in your homes and safe, I think everybody would use nuclear power actually, like a small UPS in your house. So I'm not ruling out nuclear, but again, everything is kind of crystal ball glazing at the moment. But let's not forget that, we are trying to fix an engine when the plane is flying. And you can't make mistakes. So you need to carefully choose your choices, what you would like to do by 2030, what would you like to do by 2040, and what would you like to do by 2050. The coal example, if you want to shut down coal, I can tell you there will be a big NPA in the banks.
Yes. Yes.
And joblessness in mining. There's a huge problem we have actually. So we really need to craft our choices we make in the decarbonization journey. I think more importantly, are we making progressive move towards building a new India which is more efficient than what we have built in the past? I think if we can make a tangible difference to that, I think we are really moving forward on decarbonization in my view.
It's the next question is from Mr. I got another 2 questions. I'll try and squeeze in. We got next 5 more minutes. Mr. Emmanuel from Pondicherry. He says, how does the G20 leadership help India in achieving sustainable issues? Can it be take it to its advantage in leadership position to gain and bargain more in favor of India?
Maybe if you want, I can take it and others can add. I mean, for me, it is a great opportunity to position India. You know, after the Paris Agreement and the Glasgow, there is not a single country who has actually lived the promise. It's India who has actually met quite a lot of climate commitments actually. This is exactly where we need to lead the discussions today. Today, I think India needs more funding. Technology is not an issue. It's more a funding challenge what India is facing actually. And current opportunity India has, I think we should be used as a role model, and I think Prime Minister should use this as a great opportunity to really reposition India as a superpower in decarbonization, in my view.
The only thing I'd add to that is Indonesia was the previous host country. And right at the end, Indonesia managed to get a $20 billion in funding just for decarbonization and sustainability. So there is it's not just a pipe dream. There is a real opportunity to put something concrete, especially around technology transfer, especially around indigenizing technology. And I keep going back to technology because eventually some of this stuff will be required, and getting the capital, because one of the big challenges has been the transfer of capital from the global north to the global south, India included. And while a lot of commitments have been made on capital transfer, they haven't actually materialized. So using this as an opportunity to canvas for the global south, not just for India, but using this, like I said, the Indonesia example of getting some of that capital to India, there's no opportunity like this, just adding to what Ravi has already said.
Okay, sir. Here's a question from Mr. Raju again from Chennai. He says the biggest impact in power sector is loss due to transmission loss, which is still very, very primitive in terms of technology. What do you think the solution to arrest this loss transmission, especially in the context of carbon strategy, what you're talking about?
I mean, he's right. The transmission losses are quite significant. I think the simple thing we need more copper. We need more transmission capacity, because the bigger issue than transmission losses right now is zero transmission. I mean, if you have something to transmit and some place to transmit, then it's better. Because see, the challenge right now is if I have renewable energy in point A, it has to get to point B. We don't have the most efficient way of getting it there. So even with the transmission losses, I can take that if I have enough copper across the country to get renewable energy from anywhere to anywhere, right? So for example, I love the idea that Dr. Subramaniam talked about, right? Which is this idea of, can I use all the excess renewable energy into, for example, hydrogen? But to do that, I can't do everything at point source. It can't everything be, at individual islands. The ability to transmit electrons is very important. So I think the bigger issue now is not transmission losses, which, I mean, maybe some futuristic technology exists, but we have technology right now, and that is a transmission line. You need to put more of that into the ground.
I have a slightly different thought on that. One, you have a problem and you can solve that problem, but you also have an opportunity in that problem. If you can actually move more and more grids as microgrids and not connected to the main grids, at least done this in many parts of the world. We can't do that in all parts of India, but you can have a hybrid model that is operating. Today, for example, if you go down into Ladakh, as an example, in northern part of India, quite a lot of the electricity that is produced in Ladakh is from solar. And at least 30 to 40% are not connected to the grid. It is being consumed the same day that is getting produced actually. It doesn't solve your problem, but to some extent, at least it mitigates your thing. And, I have seen many of the very remote parts of India just having one solar lamp. To a place where there is no electricity. It is still a good, something better than nothing actually.
I hear you, and it's a good idea. And I used to be in the remotest part of the world, which is Western Australia. It's a massive desert. In the middle, there'll be like few pockets, right? So in remote places where the density is very low, exactly like Ladakh and so on, the cost of getting a transmission wire is so high that it makes no sense. I agree with you fully. But everywhere else, where there's some reasonable density, right, it's very hard because just the cost doesn't, that's why you have a grid. A grid is a big battery in a sense. It's the biggest storage form, right? Because it keeps electrons moving. Every microgrid, unfortunately, the ability to manage that last 5% requires a storage of such a high capacity that it makes it uneconomic. So I'm sure we'll solve for this. We shouldn't have a debate post 7:30, but it's a big debate of ideas.
For completion, there is also high voltage DC transmission, which has been technically proven, and it can do a lot lower losses.
Great.
One is it's high voltage, which is itself lower loss. Secondly, it's DC, which is also lower loss. But
Yes.
you can't do that over distance. You can only do it over very short distance.
Yes.
Which ultra high voltage DC is probably the way to go. I don't know whether.
One last question for the evening, sir, before I let you all go. This from Mr. Murali, is an MBA student. Sir, what's the startup ecosystem in the area of sustainability? Since there is so much of scope available, keep listening to you, and what do the government should do more to promote startup ecosystem in, particularly in the sector? You can give me one or two examples where the students should focus on the startup in the area of sustainability.
That off from a slightly negative viewpoint, because we do a lot of scouting into the startup ecosystem. There's obviously a lot of startups, but what we are missing, in my opinion at least, is fundamentally new ideas. There's a lot of incremental ideas that are going around, and when I say fundamentally new ideas, it doesn't have to be technology. It can be anything. Right? It can be a better, more efficient service. It can be a solution. It can be anything. But fundamental innovation we have seen is woefully lacking. Yeah. And not just in India, many places in the world. I just came back from an event in Amsterdam where they have startups meeting from all over Europe in one place. They present their technologies. Even there, we could not get what we were looking for.
Great, sir.
I think one addition, if somebody can innovate quickly in India, carbon capture technology, we have solved the carbonization problem actually.
Great. I think this is a subject we can keep asking. There are so many questions that come. Some questions related to EV, where they said there is so much of waste generated in EV battery wastage. How does it mean solute? A lot of questions have come, but thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Big round of applause to the one of the fascinating evening. We had very insightful. Thank you, viewers, for sending a couple of very, very interesting questions as usual. Thanks so much. Now I request our past president Ravi to please step forward. Those round of presenting the memento to all of us. May all come to.
You're a joint. Not so bad.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Bye-bye. Get back home safely till we meet again. Keep this in mind, and carbon strategy is very, very important for you in India. Bye-bye. Good night.